Welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila. This is David Lichtenstein, and we're going to be speaking about protests, Hafganos, riots, and Halacha in America and in Eretz Yisrael. Are they permissible? Is looting ever permissible? You'll be surprised. Understanding racism. Does it justify these type of actions? Right? We'll be speaking about in Halacha and hashkafah. And I'm not taking any sides in this. It's really complicated what's going on in America and what often happens in Eretz Yisrael. But we'll discuss all sides of it and try to show you all the different sides of the argument. From South Africa, the epicenter of apartheid, we'll have the chief rabbi of South Africa, Rabbi Goldstein. From Washington, we'll have Rabbi Yitzchok Grossman, the Dayan of the Kollel Greater Washington. From Yerushalayim, speaking about Hafganos and Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi Senter of the eponymous Center's Yeshiva. He'll be speaking about Hafganos. Are they ever sanctioned? We'll hear the surprising opinion of Rabbi Yashiv. Does he ever allow Bachrim to go? You know, I remember years ago, what's the purpose of Hafganos? Do they help? Do they actually make anybody from? I remember years ago when my kids were little, my oldest was 5 and my second one was 3, my 2 little boys. I used to take them every summer to Eretz Yisrael to become Choyvevei Tzion. And I remember we were passing by Rehov Bar Ilan, and a whole bunch of Yerushalmis were standing on the corner screaming, Shabbos, Shabbos. 2 little boys from America. They ran to the street and they started screaming, Good Shabbos, Good Shabbos. And the question we'll discuss with Rabbi Senter, do these Hafganos really help? Or maybe if we screamed Good Shabbos and we had a big pot of cholent there with kishka and kugel, maybe that would help a lot more. So what's the purpose of these Hafganos? Are they to show Haredi power? Are they really to create change? We will have Nissim Black, the famous African-American Ger Tzedek and rapper, and he's going to talk about apprehending the damage of racism. We will have a Giyoris, Mrs Zahava Arky, also an African-American, who will share with you many stories, among them.
One time when I was 17, I was picking up 2 friends me and my friend were picking up 2 friends from an area that's kind of known to be like a little bit of a party area, but they were overage. They were over 18 and I was 17. And I was picking them up to give them a ride home. And so I went and they got in the car and I drove literally, like when the light turned green, I drove literally across the intersection, and then 2 cop cars surrounded us, and they got out of the car with their guns drawn. Guns were in our face, and they were yelling to get out of the car. But I didn't know who they were talking to, and I didn't know at all what I could have done wrong. And so they're yelling, get out of the car, get out of the car. And then they took the 2 friends who got in the car, they took them out, they arrested them, and they put them in the cop car, and they yelled at me. And they basically told me that they were going to write me 2 tickets, 1 for coming out here and 2 for acting dumb, when I had done nothing but pick up my friends. And later on, they did give us some tickets that didn't make sense at all, and they were minor traffic violations. But they weren't it made no sense for them to stop, have 4 cops and guns drawn just to say, for a traffic violation of letting people into my car when there was a red light. They got into the car when it was a red light. I asked them to just jump in, and then I continued once the light turned green.
And they were 18 years old, your friends?
They were 18 and I was 17.
And what did they arrest them for? On what grounds?
So they let them go later, and they gave them a ticket for boarding a moving vehicle, but they gave me a ticket for impeding the flow of traffic, which are 2 opposite things.
Right.
One, I can't impede the flow of traffic at a red light.
And were you scared of the cops when they came at you with guns?
I was terrified. I'm a little girl. Not a little girl, but I'm a 17-year-old girl and they're yelling and drawing guns in my face. Now, I didn't necessarily think they were going to shoot me because I'm like, there's no way I did something that they could shoot me for. That, like, I didn't do anything. But I was also really afraid for my friends who are also of color because I'm like, they're taking them away. They took them physically out of the car, arrested them, and put them in their cop car. And all for boarding a moving vehicle, which it wasn't moving, obviously. It wasn't moving. But whatever they want to say, that's fine. But even if it was, even if, let's say, the car was moving and they jumped in, would they ever do that to a white person? I don't know. Would they rip somebody out of the car and arrest them for boarding a moving vehicle? Would they put guns in their face?
I'll share with you. My daughter was in an Uber with an African American driver and got pulled over by a cop for something, and the cop was screaming into the driver's face. And my daughter leaned over and she said, "Excuse me, officer, is there a problem?" And he looked back. There was suddenly a white girl in the car. And he said, "There's no problem." So she said, "So then why are you screaming at the driver?" And the guy looked all nonplussed and he backed away. And I think that's your response about what if he done it to a white girl.
Right. Exactly. I mean, the things that my white friends in high school got away with cops blows my mind. I had no idea the disparity, the difference. Things that they for sure should have gotten tickets for. Some of them should have been arrested.
You're talking about the white girls, you're saying?
Yeah, they were my friends, and they couldn't believe, like, riding with me and seeing what happened. Like, how many times I got stopped? Just stopped. Routine.
How many times were you stopped?
I would say, let's say junior, senior year of high school, I was probably stopped like 6 times.
Okay, before we go to our program, a little bit of housekeeping. You know that we opened up ysm.live, yeshivashalmaila.live, where there are basically 15 or 12 hours of shiurim a day, all on Zoom. You could hear Reb Moshe Hauer in Chumash. You could have Shachris, by the way. We have 3 minyanim a day for people who don't have a minyan yet. We have the Daf Yomi a few times a day, starting with Rabbi Aryeh Leibowitz at 6:15. We have Rabbi Avram Kahn in Halacha, Reb Hershel Shechter in Halacha, the great guy, in Hilchas Tefillah. This is just today's, Reb Shmuel Wiener. We have the Parsha, Reb Daniel Kalish, Reb Gamliel Rabinovich from Eretz Yisrael on the Parsha, hashkafah. I'm reading today's, this is one day of Zoom Shiurim with Ramanis Friedman, etc., etc., etc. Bottom line is, it's Zoom. You could now debate, discuss in Shir with any of these great Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbanim, Halacha, Machshava, Daf Yomi, Chasidus. First Zoom yeshiva ever. Try it out. If you, by the way, have any comments in our program, just to go back, our caller number is 732-806-8700. Among the option is comments. You press 2. info@headlinesbook.com. And to remind everybody here, we put up all our Mara Makaimis on our Headlines website. So anytime we mention a Gemara, a Chazal, a Rishon, and Achron, they're all there, they're photocopied. If you're interested in learning it, if you're a Rav and you're saying a shir on some of these very interesting topics, such as Hafganos, racism, demonstration, all your Mara Makaimis are there for you. I do want to be making an announcement. I've been doing this now for just about 5 years. And I've taken off a few weeks here and there, but it's quite exhausting. I have a lot of other day jobs. So I'm going to be taking some time off. We will have some really fabulous other Magidei Shir hosts hosting for the next number of weeks until I come back. And I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll enjoy our fabulous hosts. Before we go to our program, I like to say a vart. And I want to talk about what a tzaddik is. And I think this will surprise you. I'll go so far to say is that after I saw this Torah, I said, maybe I could also be a tzaddik. What does the parsha say in this week? It talks about a saita. And it says, if the saita drinks the water and she wasn't tameh, v'im loy nitma ha'isha utahoirahi, v'niksa v'nizra azara. If she's tahira, niksa, she's cleansed, v'nizra azara. Rashi says, if she had no children, she would have children. If she had one, she would have two. Basically, she became blessed for drinking the water and proven not to have been consummated any act and being a saita. And the question is, why? This isn't a Beis Yaakov girl. This is a girl, her husband said, do not be miyachid with so-and-so. He warned her, there was kinoi, and there was stira. And she goes into, she's over on yichud, a married woman with somebody who her husband was envious of, was worried about, was jealous of. And she doesn't do an aveira. But why is she blessed? What's the v'niksa v'nizra azara? And I want to share a thought with you. There's a story with the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim, somebody came to him and he said, Holy Rebbe, a lot of times I'm davening Shemona Esrei and suddenly I'm up to Alekai Nitzair and I realized I didn't have 1 minute of kavanah the entire time. Somebody said, the best way to take a trip around the world is to daven Shemona Esrei sometimes, right? What should I do? He asked the Chafetz Chaim. So the Chafetz Chaim said, in the marketplace, there was a lady in a push cart full of red, shiny Macintosh apples, selling her apples for, 5 cents each or 5 ruble each, whatever that was. And suddenly a bunch of rowdy boys ran past, and one of them, in the busy marketplace, knocked over her apple cart, and they went all over the floor. So people saw shiny apples, red apples, bouncing around. They started grabbing them. Poor Europe. And she started screaming, Ganovim, Ganovim, thieves. And they just were grabbing the apples and running. There was a smart guy there. He looks at her and he says, listen, instead of screaming, that's not going to help. You have an apple cart. Grab as many as you can that are near you. Put them into your cart. Chap was du kennst. At least you'll be left with that. So the Chafetz Chaim said to this fellow, you were up to Sim Shalom, Alekai Nitzar? Say Sim Shalom b'kavana. Say Alekai Nitzar b'kavana. It's not black and white. Chap was du kennst. What does that mean? I want to say this in a powerful way. Who's called a tzaddik, right? The only one of the Avos or Shvatim is called a tzaddik is Yosef. In the Torah, 2 people are called a tzaddik. Noach is called a tzaddik. But Yosef is also called al shloisha pisha Yisrael val arba lo yishivenu al michram bekesef tzaddik. Now, well, why is he a tzaddik? Vayimoen vayana sachutza. So the Gemara in Saita Daf Lamed Vav, startling Gemara. There's a machlekes in the Gemara. Amar Rav Chana bar Bizna, Amar Reb Shimon Chasida. Right? What does the Gemara say? Vayovei abeisa lasais malachtei. He came to do his work. Shmuel says he came to do his work. V'chad Amar Rav says, no. He came to sleep with his master's wife. She was beautiful. She came on to him. He decided, lasais tzrachav nichnas. So what happened? Vayimoin vayana sachutza. But what does it say? It says, the Gemara says, Vayifoizuz roya noatz yadav bekarka. He almost did the avera. He grabbed the ground with his nails. And what happened? V'yotza shichvazare mibein tziparnei yadav. Right? He was supposed to have 12 shvatim. The zera of 10 shvatim disappeared through his nails, and he was left with Ephraim and Menashe, 2 shvatim. Right? Yosef came really close, according to Rav. He came laseis malachtei, right? Laseis tzrachav imay, and he almost sinned. But he's called a tzaddik. Why? Because he stopped. At the last minute, noatz tzipanav bekarka. Imagine that. And for that, he's called a tzaddik. So, if you read Art Scroll books, the tzaddik is the guy, when he was 3 weeks old, he made a bracha nursing from his mother by his upshare, and he finished Chas already, etc. The tzaddik of the Gemara, noatz tzipornov bekarka, v'yotza shichvazari mibein, and that's called Yosef HaTzaddik. He stopped at the last minute. So I want to suggest to you, this Saita, she really liked somebody, and her husband became aware of it. He found texts. And he warned her, and she was miyached, but she stopped. And you know what? For stopping, you get schar. Very few people are perfect. But at the end, do you know that in the stock market, there's something called a stop-loss order? It means if you buy stock at 50, you could just hold on to it, and if the market goes against you, like it did a few weeks ago, watch it go from 50, it could go to 20 or 30. There are stocks that went down 80, 90%, 95%. Stop-loss order means where you say, you know what, I bought it at 50. At 40, 30, pick your number. You tell the machine, or used to be a broker, today it's all electronic, sell out at that price. I want to limit my losses to this. You can have a stop-loss on Averis too, on Midas, on Hanhugis. You missed Shachris that morning. You woke up late. You had to daven in a hurry. You ran to work. It was a horrible day at the office or in yeshiva, right? It was horrible. First Seder was horrible. Your trades went against you. The deal you were working on fell apart. Everything's bad. When you come home, does it have to be a horrible supper with your family? Does it have to be horrible when you're doing homework with your kids? Or you could just say, you know what? Not till now. Just because it was like this till now, doesn't mean it has to be that way the whole day. Can I put a stop-loss order in on my life, on my midas, on Averis? And if I do have a stop-loss, am I rewarded like Yosef HaTzadik? And the answer is, v'niksa v'nizra zera. She stopped. Tzaddik is not a black and white. You can say, you know what, I didn't daven Shachar spell, I didn't daven Mincha, I davened Ma'ariv. I welcomed the great evening, right, with Ma'ariv. The Gemara says, Amru alav Rebbe Lezer ben Durdoi, shaloi haniach zoyne achas ba'olam shaloi ba'aleh. Famous Gemara. One time he heard a zoyne say on him that he's impossible. Everybody can do tshuva except for him. Kacha Lezer ben ein mekabel and I say tshuva. So he went to the mountains. He went to his parents. And everybody said, you're wiped out. You're zero. Nothing. You're done. So what happened? He put his head between his birkav and he said, "En adava tali elabi." And what happened? And Heiniach Roshi ben birkav achiyatsa nishmasai Rebbe Lezer ben Durdoi mizumin l'chai elam haba. And everybody says, it's a great story. Why is he called Rebbe Lezer ben Durdoi? I mean, he was really profligate, every Zaina Bailam, and he's called, what's the Reb? What did he teach us? And you know what he taught us? You could be bad, and you know what? And then you were good. And that counts. And that's v'niksa, v'nizra zara. And juxtapose that to another person who was told he can't do tshuva. The Gemara says on Acher, the Gemara Chagig on Daf Tezvav Amar Aleph, Yotza Baskil, Shuvu Banim Shoivim, Chutz me Acher. You're done, Acher. Totally different attitude. Amar, Hoyel ve'itrid. If I have nothing to lose, Leifik was Hanu by Alma. Let me go out and have a really good time. Nafak eshkach zoyna. Right? And what did he do? He went the other way. I'm out. You know what? I'm out of here. What does that mean? There was no stop-loss order on the life of Acher, as opposed to Rebbe and Lezer ben Durdoi. And you know where else you see that? The Gemara says about Arpa. We just finished the story of Rus, right? There was Rus and Arpa were the two sisters-in-law. And then there was Nami. Rus went along with Nami. Kashetilchi elech. Arpa kissed her and left. And the Gemara says in Saita and Afman Beis Amid Beis, the day she left, she was mezana with 100 men. Ultimately, the Gemara says Goliath became her son from that evening. But 100 men, like 1 minute, she's almost a Giyaris. She's almost Mizdabek. She's the sister-in-law of Rus, the grandmother of David. And the next day, that night, 100? I mean, what is it? And the answer is, some people have a bad day, and they say, you know what? Stop loss. And some people say, you know what? I'm just letting go. You know what? You ever see that person? He got disenchanted. He had something went wrong with his Rebbe, his relationship. And the next thing, he's out of here. He's gone. And you know what? That's not the Jewish way. The Jewish way is the Saita, Haroya Saita B'Kol. What do you say? V'niksa v'nizra azara. You had a bad day? You had a bad relationship? You made a mistake? V'nizra azara. There's no reason you can't save it and say, stop, that's it. And for that, what do we see from Yosef? Noasti, you're called a tzaddik. This is really, honestly, my type of tzaddik because, life isn't perfect. And I could tell you personally, I have very few perfect days, and I can tell you certainly for the last 3 months, very few of them at the office, right? But what? We could choose to be chas v'shalom, like Arpa, like Acher, or we could choose to be like Rebbe Lezer Bar Dudai, or V'niksa v'nizra zara, and ultimately like Yosef, HaTzadik. Me and you, we could also be tzaddikim. Now let's go to our wonderful guests.
Joining us from Washington is Rabbi Yitzchok Grossman, who's Rosh Chabura of the Greater Washington Community Kollel, Talmud of Rabbi David Soloveitchik, a Musmach of Rabbi Zalman Nechemia Goldberg. Welcome, Rabbi Yitzchok.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Rabbi Yitzchok, we're seeing the country is being swept by riots, protests, demonstrations, etc. And we live in the United States, so it's clearly something that affects all of us, or many of us who live in, certainly the greater, cities. Washington, I know, has had where you are, has a significant amount. So, but also as Jews, we see in Eretz Yisrael, there's been a long history of Hafganos, etc. So is protests, riots, is that something that is morally, halachically acceptable to Jews?
So there's obviously a big difference between protests and riots. Protests, as everyone brings, go back to the Gemara. The Gemara talks about lechvif ginu balayla, that there is such a thing as applying some kind of entreaty or some kind of pressure, perhaps, on authorities to behave in a way that we would appreciate, in a way that's more responsible and more decent. Riot, which implies destruction of property and injury, is a much graver, much less justifiable thing to do.
So walk me through it. Let's say the person who had been this fellow Chauvin, this Rioting, the cop, wasn't to a black individual he had done it, but let's say he had done it to a Jew. And chas v'shalom, if the United States had been in a situation that you have in Europe, where there had been a long history of anti-Semitism and a long history of Jews dying mysteriously in cops' care, etc., while in the hands of officers of the law, which we can't appreciate as Americans, but we could certainly see it in, Germany 70 years ago, right? Would the destruction of property be justified in such a situation?
So, poskim do talk about destroying property to stop someone from doing an ister. The Gemara talks about tearing off a garment if the garment is not tznius. Rachel stole the truffle from her father. Some poskim explain that was like a frishim meisura. Those examples are much more limited to destroying property that's being used to do the avla, that's being used to do something wrong. In general, just looting random businesses in the hope that will put enough pressure on the authorities as an expression of outrage and grief to hope to change policy. I find that hard to justify. If you wanted to burn down a police station, burn down the place of the Rishonim where they do their terrible things, again, maybe if that is the place that's doing the avlas, maybe more justifiable. Just to attack the economy, just to attack random citizens, random private citizens, I think is very hard to justify.
Let me give you a few examples of where we've seen this historically. Let me try. And I don't want to say I'm justifying anything, but I'm trying to see is there any possible halachic mekayros. The case of Pilegesh Begiva, right? A woman was raped, and nobody did anything, and it was done in an abusive case. So the Navi tells us the husband wanted to inspire Klal Yisrael, to shock them into doing something. So he cut her into 12 pieces and sent one limb or one part of her to each shevet of Klal Yisrael, and it incited the response that he had hoped for. They all came down to shevet Binyamin, and they killed many of them, etc. Now, clearly, cutting up the limbs of his Pilegesh and sending her all over to Klal Yisrael is something that is is clearly you would assume would seem to be nibul hameis, is certainly outrageous. But he was taking the position that in extreme times, extreme actions are required. What would you think of that as a metaphor?
So this exact point was made several hundred years ago in a tshuva of Rabbi Yitzchok Grossman, the son of the Carbon Saddle. He talked about a case: a Jew was murdered, and they wanted to file a criminal complaint against the non-Jew who had killed him, and that would have involved an autopsy. We wouldn't have done it, but the government would have done an autopsy. And the question was, can we do the autopsy? Can we allow the autopsy? Can we encourage it in order to catch the murderer? And he actually brings the raya from Pilegesh Begiva. He says exactly the point you made, that he received from Pilegesh Begiva they could be menavel l'meis to get justice, to avenge a murder. He has two dichuyim for that, two reasons why he thinks it's not compelling. First, he says, who said he was right? So the Pilegesh Begiva is a terrible tragedy full of actions that weren't correct. So first of all, who said he was right? He said, we don't know that was correct. And even if you assume that was correct, he says, that situation wasn't just a private murder. That was something. I'm not sure why he feels it was different, but he seems to feel that was an endemic problem, and lawlessness was just taking root, and it was necessary for the security of Klal Yisrael. But in general, we do find this point made by poskim that avenging murders of Jews by non-Jews is important, and it is something we have to. Many poskim allow autopsies in this context because of the point that getting justice for the mace is something. Rabbi Kalatkin, the different Malkiel. Others do allow autopsies because it's for the mace's own benefit. That certainly, if we can get justice for him, we often do nibul mace in cases where the mace stands to benefit. So the basic idea is a good one. That certainly the nibul mace, certainly of the mace himself, for his own benefit and for the benefit of all Klal Yisrael, is certainly something that we could allow. Yes.
So in the case over here, you said he answers two things. He said there it was a societal issue. Right, endemic to this. Well, that would clearly be the case that they're saying over here. I mean, there have been many cases very similar to this. So they're saying it's a societal issue, and therefore we can go beyond the law, and we can do things such as cutting a body up and sending it to 12 parts of the country to do it. Would that be then analogous to our case? So, okay, this is endemic. It's happened many times. This is what they believe, right? I'm not taking any political positions. I'm just trying to look it through their eyes. And therefore, something like it's like Pilegesh Begiva, and therefore we have a right to loot. That's where I'm going to, or riot.
Yeah, first of all, the third point I was making, I think it's important that in these cases, it's generally assumed by the poskim, many Achronim make this point, that it's assumed to be for the benefit of the mace himself to avenge his murder, even though he said, the dam of Zachariah we find, that the mace doesn't rest until they catch his murderer, they say, whether it's Hamlet or whether it's the dam of Zachariah according to Chazal, that this is an idea that many Achronim endorse, that was for the benefit of the mace himself. The question is, can you extend that to just making karbanos out of innocent third parties just because they think it's necessary to get the attention? Nibul hameis is something we often allow when there is there are many heterim, there are many cases, many of them do involve the benefit of the mace himself, Eretz Yisrael, to be buried with family, but in general, nibul hameis is much more subjective, I think, and much more easy to set aside for a great mitzvah. The mace himself might want it if it was for a great mitzvah, but to go burn down a store or just beat somebody up, somebody who's basically chaf mipesha, just because he's an American citizen and is in some sense responsible for the overall thing. Yeah, potentially, if the need is great enough, if you're saving lives, I guess maybe you can do it. But it seems to me that the benefit and the connection to this person is fairly tenuous. To destroy random property seems to me to be a reach.
Okay, so let me try another place on the Halacha. In the story when Shimon and Levi killed Shem, so the Rishonim, Ramban, Rambam, Maral, etc., are niskasha. What right do they have to kill the entire town? And a number of answers are suggested, including, I believe, the Rambam says, there's a concept of dinim. There's, if you did not create a just society, then you are guilty. You are part of that society. You are not a bystander. You are considered a participant in that. Doesn't that seem to be very analogous to the claim that the aggrieved parties in this situation are making? They're saying it has been very unjust for us for many years. Again, I'm not advocating whether that's correct or not. I'm just repeating their position. Since society as a whole has been bystanders, while these prejudices, etc., have been and their acts have been perpetrated on us. Society as a whole is guilty, and therefore anything that stands in our way is part of a guilty party. We're not killing people like they did in Shem, but we will destroy property. What do you think of that argument?
So again, it's one of these arguments that, in principle, I think is a reasonable argument. That it's true that there's a very strong idea in the Torah and Halacha that people have a responsibility to as you said, to establish a system of justice, and they're faulted, and they can even be punished for not doing so. But first of all, I would note that some of the Rishonim who are chalik on that approach, who criticized the Rambam for this, say that they say it was unreasonable to have such expectations of Shem, to judge their melech, etc. Here, it's not a question of judging the melech, but the point is you have to make a reasonable assessment of how much can be expected, how much are they trying. So certainly in the case of a society that was completely morally bankrupt, a society that you want to go back to the Civil War, you want to go back to societies of 600 years ago, certainly we could argue that there are societies whose moral degeneration, whose lack of justice is so great that it would justify violent action and just... The question would be, so I don't disagree with the argument in principle. The question would be whether that's a reasonable application to modern America, where we do try. We have courts. We have all kinds of police departments do have internal affairs department. Now, arguably, that the system is not good enough, and I personally agree. I personally agree that it's a great stain on our society that we can't uproot this kind of egregious behavior. But the question is, for the average citizen, society as a whole, who does try, we have courts, we have, we do have accountability. We don't have enough. The question is, do we really reach the level of Shem that we are guilty of a capital violation of Mitzvah Bnei Noach, of a Siyas Dinim? I don't think that we're quite there yet, but I don't disagree with you in principle that a society that was sufficiently bankrupt, sufficiently delinquent in their obligation to impose justice, then direct action, even violent action, could be justified to gain some actual justice.
Let's change location. Let's go to Eretz Yisrael now. Hafganos have been going on. I learned in Eretz Yisrael decades ago, and I remember running from the Hafganos that in the mirror they went surrounded the Rosh Yeshiva during a Hafgana, the policemen. Is it mutter to make a Hafgana in Eretz Yisrael? And let's discuss the issues. One issue is, it often gets to the point of Chil Hashem, it starts with a peaceful Hafgana, and then you have them calling the police Nazi. So, is there an issue of Chil Hashem, A? And B, could there be, if it's on Shabbos, they say over a story, a guy walks into a store in Mei Sharim, and there's a bunch of rocks. They're selling rocks. So he says, "Excuse me, what are the rocks for?" He says, "The rocks are to throw on Shabbos, so the muzman before Shabbos, so they're not muktzah." He says, and he looks at the big rocks. He says, "And what are those for?" He says, "Oh, those rocks, those are the Shir Chazanish rocks." So I'm having a yeshiva. So my question would be, there are both issues of Chil Hashem, possibly, as well as issues of Chil Shabbos. Are you allowed to participate in a Hafgana? You're in yeshiva, there's a Hafgana going on, you're curious, it's geschmack, it's fun. Are you or are you not allowed to participate? Walk me through some of the halachic issues.
So yes, there are at least a half dozen halachic issues. You mentioned just the kind of a relatively concrete one, the muktzah one. This is actually discussed by poskim in the sources that I got from your people. Rabbi Zilber talks about this. The technical halachas of being mazmin rocks. Muktzah you can get around if you're careful. You can get around muktzah. It's not the more serious issues, I think, are the other ones you mentioned. There's Chil Hashem, and as Rabbi Zilber notes, Bittul Torah. Yeshiva students ought to be learning Torah, and even people who are not Torahsim Nasim, if they have free time, Torah is very important too. So again, we know that sometimes mitzvahs are more important than Torah. It says that you mabatel Talmud Torah for certain mitzvahs, not for all mitzvahs, and we have all kinds of rules about mitzvah she'yev shelas l'idei acherim, mitzvah she'ev shelas l'idei acherim. So Bittul Torah, Chil Hashem are major issues. Chil Hashem is a tricky one because yes, I think there's no question that they can produce some Chil Hashem. On the other hand, many of the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael who did condone or even encourage these Hafganos in Eretz Yisrael, as you noted, the Hafganos had more to do with B'nai L'Makom and mitzvahs specifically, whether it's desecration of graves, or Chil Shabbos, or Shirut Lumi, or in the Dati Lumi camp, the returning of territory, which is a religious issue. So many of the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael felt that the unchecked Chil Shabbos, the movie theaters open on Shabbos, the public transportation open on Shabbos, the general driving in the streets on Shabbos, that itself is a tremendous Chil Hashem. So the question is, A, will the protest solve any of that? You're arguing that on the one hand they create Chil Hashem, on the other hand you can argue they may not relieve any of the pre-existing Chil Hashem. One could argue that maybe they will relieve some of the Chil Hashem if they actually shut down some of the Chil Shabbos, or if they then maybe it is something. So Chil Hashem has to be balanced certainly within Chil Hashem itself, one Chil Hashem against the other. Moreover, the connected Chil Hashem, there are various obligations that we have a mitzvah, whether it's tochacha in the narrow sense, whether, as Rabbi Yashiv and others have said, not so much tochacha, it's just to affect a policy change of reducing Chil Shabbos. In terms of the Chil Hashem that arises, so the question is how much of that, again, is inherent to the idea of a public protest, and how much of that is because there are foolish people and people who are doing things that are not condoned by the Gedolei Torah that are causing the Chil Hashem. If it's either way, we have to be taken into account. Certainly, we don't want rampant Chil Hashem. But the question is whether it's an unfortunate and limited byproduct, or whether it's the entire system is causing Chil Hashem. And nevertheless, the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael, by and large, seem to have been in favor of these protests. They have felt that the need to, whether we use the expression Tutvei Shreitzman, that we have to express our Hara Chil Shabbos, then the idea of being Machiach and not tolerating Aveira goes back to the Gemara, the Korban Bayis Rishon, and other sources, that there's a major obligation to, even if you can't convince them, certainly if you can, to show that we don't accept it, that we don't tolerate it. How to balance that against the Chil Hashem that might emerge is a tricky question, and the general attitude seems to be that it's hard to find a stip in Shulchan Aruch that exactly tells you the formula, but it is a question that has to be carefully considered by Gedolei Torah.
Now it's interesting. The tshuva from Rabbi Yashiv that you quote says we're not protesting al tzecheach techiach because there is no hashkafah for people who clearly will not listen. He says the anti-protesters are clearly set in their ways, they're weird, they've been told many times. He says it has nothing to do with the but it's about taking a social stand for Shabbos. In other words, if we just mizalzel Shabbos, it loses it's a stain on it, it's a scar on the face of Shabbos. When we stand up, we are basically saying Shabbos is something near and dear and powerful to us, and we see it, our children. It's a protest against the subjugation of Shabbos. And he says it has nothing to do with Teichacha, because I see that the tshuva is written about. Is there a chiach, the Bir Halacha and the Mishnah Berurah, Nochsim Kippah, by a Russia, how many times, could they klala, tzibah? It has nothing to do with that. Liash says it's about, in our minds, seeing Shabbos as something important and beautiful. Something was done to hurt the honor of Shabbos, and we want to sort of, re-erect the honor of Shabbos, just as an aside. But let me ask you a question. I'm a policeman. I'm a Freya guy, or I could even be a former policeman. And when I get a call on Shabbos, there's a big demonstration, rush to Kikar Shabbos. So I have to get into my car on Shabbos. Could be, maybe, I don't think it's ever pikuach nefesh, but so if I'm from, maybe I wouldn't. If I'm Freya, certainly. Maybe I'm just Misorati, I usually wouldn't. And here I am, and it's on Shabbos, and I'm driving, or a similar case, I saw that it was, I think, 2 years ago, where it was on Miron, was the Rashbi's yard site was on Lag Baimer was Sunday, and Rabbi Yitzchok Yosef, I think we had him on the program, discussed the issue of if you go there now, you're going to cause thousands of policemen on Shabbos to be driving and setting up the site and this and that. So he suggested that we announce nobody come there until midnight, so they have a chance to set it up after Shabbos. But he was very sensitive to the Chil Shabbos, and as a concept of Lifnei Iver Loisita and Michshol, which is the Raisa. So by going to a protest on Shabbos and screaming and yelling, right? On one hand, you're saying there's no issue of Chil Hashem and we're doing a good thing, but I'm certainly being Gairim Chil Shabbos for many, many people, for all the policemen who come, etc. Do I have to worry about the Lifnei Iver aspect?
So I think it's definitely something that should be worried about, both because of the technical Lifnei Iver aspect as well as the general point that Rabbi Yashiv makes that we don't want to cause Chil Shabbos. We don't want to promote Chil Shabbos, even regardless of even if you say Lifnei Iver doesn't apply to Mumrim. That's a question of the poskim, whether Lifnei Iver applies to Apikursim and people who are Parkei Ol. But again, we certainly don't want to promote Chil Shabbos. So I think there's no question that in any policy, any public policy decision we take, like the question of Meron, we certainly should be taking into account Chil Shabbos. If we care about Shabbos, even if we don't care about our fellow Jews, which we probably should also, we certainly should care about Chil Shabbos. The question here is that if we go with what, let's say, the Tshuva and Rabbi Yashiv were discussing, so you focused on the sensitivity he has to Shabbos, he actually goes further than that. He actually says that the point of these protests is actually to stop the further Chil Shabbos in general. At least he calls it La'atzoras, Magefat, Pashtut, Tarisat, Shabbat. Now, we want to stop the spreading of Chil Shabbos. So the question would have to be, you'd have to weigh one against the other. If one feels that these protests could have a significant long-term effect in reducing Chil Shabbos, however, it will also come along with it will come a short-term increase in Chil Shabbos for this Shabbos. Again, that's a question of weighing one against the other. Now, in general, in Judaism, we don't believe that the end automatically justifies the means, that we can't post can talk about in the context of Kiruv. Post can talk about, can you invite a guest who's going to travel to your house for Shabbos if you think you'll make him from, and then he'll keep many more Shabbosos in the future. And that's a very fraught issue, and it's a very controversial issue. But so it's not so pashut. But so in terms of the technical Lifnei Iver, you have to go through that to again decide whether any short-term Chil Shabbos is balanced by the longer-term stemming the tide. And in terms of in general, the hergeshim of showing we support Shabbos, and in terms of turning back the tide of Chil Shabbos, certainly you have to balance that against the short term. Now, in the short term, you mentioned Lifnei Iver. Post can debate whether this is called Lifnei Iver. There are indeed those who make your point, who say that we should not be doing demonstrations and blocking roads on Shabbos and having protests on Shabbos, that will cause police to come on Shabbos. There are those who make that point. And there are those who disagree and say that we're not asking them to come. We'd be happier if they don't come. And if they don't, some say we want them to come. We want them to protect us. We need them. Others say, we don't want them to come. Let them not come. The fact that they choose to come, we didn't ask them to. We didn't invite them to. We don't want them to. The fact that they will do it is some kind of grama, and it's not necessarily the case that would be Lifnei Iver on our part. Again, if we care about Shabbos, it's certainly something that should be taken into account, but that has to be weighed against the potential benefits. And if you believe the potential benefits are great enough.
In closing, do you think protests achieve their goals or not, historically?
So, it's a good question.
I know you're more Chayshim Mishpat, you're a Talmud Chacham, so a worldly person. You live in Washington, Greater Washington, so you're this epicenter of the political tumult in the world. Do you believe protests serve their purpose?
It's the crucial question, and that is behind many of the decisions of the Gedolei Torah of the last century of whether to support them. And I think it's very much a Matthias question. It's very much a question that has to be asked to experts. Rabbi Yitzchok Grossman has a great tshuva about this, where he says it's a Matthias question. That's why we can't bring riots. What Moshe said in 75, what he would have held in 85. He quotes Tendler and others. He heard Moshe might have said different things in different cases. It's very much a Matthias question. He says, even in the Gemara's case, it says, they asked him, what should we do?
He's referring to Ramosha, but was very opposed to the protests to free Soviet Jewry.
Yes, and in 75, Moshe signed the document saying we should not participate in this. But even then, he said it was because of the Matthias. It's not going to work. We can't, even though they're well-meaning, the protesters, we can't agree with everything they say. But in 68, it's reported that Moshe sent a letter via his son-in-law, Rabbi Tendler, a letter in support of one of the rallies. And in 85, Rabbi Yehuda Lankin said he'd heard reports that he felt were credible. Moshe might have changed his mind. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. Rabbi Henkin says, small people can change their minds, great people can. It's very much a Matthias question. And I personally am very sympathetic to Rabbi Yosher Ber Soloveitchik's approach. He always said on these questions, security questions, protest questions, you have to ask the experts. The Gemara says they asked the Matronisa. Why did they ask the Matronisa, a Roman noblewoman? Not because she was Das Torah. They asked her because she understood the system. She understood what would work and what was likely to work. And that's the approach Rabbi Henkin takes, and that's the approach that, to me, makes a lot of sense. You're not going to find the answer in Shulchan Aruch or even in Chazal, because the same way when it comes to a medical question, we ask doctors what is the best recommendation. There are no certainties here, but what's the best advice that we can get from experts in epidemiology when it comes to protests? We ask political consultants. We ask people who understand the system. Do protests work? Well, Tiananmen Square was crushed, at least hasn't done much. The Vietnam War protest arguably helps. The civil rights protest arguably helped. I think it's very hard to give any kind of general rule. Do they help? Do they not? I think some do, and I think some don't. even when they do, it's always hard to know whether the protest was just a symptom of changing public opinion or whether the protest actually caused the changing, which came first, what's the Simon or Siba. So it's very hard to know, but I think the best you can do is to try to speak to those who understand the history, speak to those who understand the government, and make the best decision you can based on the assessment of the current Metzius, and not to approach the question with sweeping absolute dogma, but rather to assess each case on a case-by-case basis.
Rabbi Yitzchok, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, bye-bye. We have with us on the phone from Eretz Yisrael, Nissim Black. Nissim was born Damien Jamal Black from Seattle. He's African-American, a black rapper. He converted to Orthodox Judaism in 2011. He's probably the most famous Orthodox rapper. Welcome, Nissim.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dave. How are you doing?
Thank God, Baruch Hashem. I want to ask you, it's a sensitive topic, but I don't think there's anybody more qualified to answer it. Many of the Orthodox community, all of the Orthodox community in America, are watching, the civil unrest, the social unrest, the riots here, and many of us don't really understand it. We don't have day-to-day connectivity with the African-American community. We sort of live a little bit in ghettos, etc. And as somebody who's both Orthodox, a ger, and African-American, perhaps you could describe to us, the sense of rage that many American blacks have, the type of discrimination that they may see on a daily level that we just can't empathize with, we don't appreciate it because we've never sensed it. But as somebody who grew up black in America, could you try to describe some of this anger, frustration, etc.?
Yeah, I try to do my best. I think one of the biggest misconceptions right now that we're getting, and primarily because of the media, is that, this is all behind George Floyd, right? And then there's people that are a little bit smaller than that. They have a little bit more knowledge, and they can say, no, it's behind, the several murders that's happened over the last few years, or the last year even, of African Americans by the police and blah blah blah. And the truth is that it's much deeper than even that. There's a systemic racism that has been in America, going back all the way before, from slavery, the Constitution, that has put African Americans in a position of being less than. I mean, we got here as slaves. A lot of people don't even know that. How many times I've been asked by people like, oh, when did your family move to America? Like, my family came in chains, what I mean, from Africa to America. So there is a deeper, I could just describe for you some of the systemic racism that we may have dealt with as kids. I went to a high school that was predominantly African American. We did not have textbooks for most of my 4 years of high school that I was there, but somehow we had brand new football uniforms, basketball uniforms, number one, in sports, or either in the state or even in the country. I think we were in basketball, brand new football stadium. But how do we not have books?
How did the school not have books? Explain that.
I don't. To be honest, everything at this, at this age, we went out. I remember doing a protest for books or whatever. We had no idea. There must be some issue with the allocation of budget. How come we have money over here in sports and different things like that we obviously are going to excel and succeed in, right? These are our guys.
How did you study? How did you study in school? I'm curious, without books.
We were studying from Xerox packets, so they would never let you take the books home. So you would pass down packets to the next grade, to the next grade. You know what I'm saying? Until they would, they'd be messed up, and then they Xerox some more. A little bit at a time. So it was very, very complicated. And then you go over to a different school for whatever reason. I would go to other schools. That is for sure not a problem. There's books. There's new everything, extracurricular activities. So much, and it's much deeper than what the eye sees. You understand what I mean?
Listen, could you share what it's like to be an African American male in the United States? Like, give us an example. Like, has this ever happened to you? Like, give me an example. My daughter told me. Let me just show you just as an example. My daughter, who went to school, to college, she said she's studying psychology, and she became friendly with a very nice African American girl. And the girl said to her, like, when she speaks up in class and asks an intelligent question, like, the professor's eyes would widen, like, wow, an intelligent question from you? And she said, it's something we can't appreciate. We can't even, give us a few examples. Our audiences, we have, I don't know, we get 100,000 downloads a month, almost all white, Orthodox. Try to explain what a step into your shoes for a few minutes.
I think the biggest thing is that, primarily what you'll deal like more so, I would say, on the East Coast or down south. Now, I'm from the, Pacific Northwest, where most of the racism that we felt, we got hit by gentrification and everything else also too. But I think the biggest thing is knowing that your prep for life is a completely different prep for life. You understand what I mean? So there's less conversations in the home about saving, investing, and growth and different things like that economically, and more conversations in the home about watch out for the police, try to get yourself a good job. Hopefully you'll graduate high school. You understand what I mean? You already don't have certain expectations to even succeed. You're almost set up in your mind that there's no way out, because it's very far. I know even myself growing up, there was very few people that I seen that were successful. Most of my uncles and aunties, we were battled around by the FBI when I was 8 years old. I remember them coming to take Clinton. This is during the time when Clinton was the president, and he had declared a war on drugs. And I tell you, it was almost like every positive male role model I knew in my life ended up in prison, over a course of months. People I didn't see for another 11 years later, right? So in that case, a lot of times, especially when the father is removed out of the home also too, right? This is just what happens. This is the way life is. You grow up without having a father.
Was your father removed?
No, thank God I wasn't. Thank God my father was not removed from the home. But it's the typical thing that happens. My family, honestly, although there was a lot of like drug dealing and abuse, I grew up with a lot of those things. I was definitely supposed to still have two parents in the house. I wouldn't say it was exactly the Brady Bunch, but for sure I had two parents in the home. But most of my friends, I can probably count on, on two fingers, the friends that I grew up with that also had two parents in the home. Mostly everybody else either lived with the grandmother, lived with the aunt, parents were strung out on drugs. It's very, very hard. So you almost feel like, to some degree, that there's no way out, and you won't be able to succeed. And you feel those things when you walk into places and you go for a job interview and things like that. You already feel like everything is already against you. And it feels that way because honestly, it is that way. Systemic racism says that. The research shows, the studies show, you know what I mean? For how much, I think it is for the average income. I forget how they do the percentages or whatever. For every $100 that a white American has, is $5.4 of African American that they have. So you're almost set up in a way to where the system doesn't want you to succeed. And so you always feel like you're at odds. So then when, later on comes the brutality from the police and different things like that, that is a result of, listen, what else do we have? Like, we were never taught these things, you know what I'm saying? And one of the most beautiful things about me is that I'm able to, I was able to be Magaya. I come in, I've met so many different people. I've learned so much that I can only look back and say, just wow, we really didn't have a shot. If it wasn't for Hashem, I wouldn't have had a shot. I don't think I'd be alive or for sure out of prison. Most black males in America, most of them are in prison. You understand what I mean? Most of them. So,
listen, what a lot of people struggle to understand is what you're describing is, let's say, the drug raids. I'm curious, did you ever have a drug raid in your house?
Yes, I did. When I was 8 years old, we were battered around by the FBI.
Define battered around. What does that mean?
Battered is when they kick in the door, the phones were tapped, everything was, They've been watching my house for a while. My house was used for a lot of trafficking.
So what people struggle with is, and I'm sure I'm going to get this question on my calls, is they're going to say, why didn't you ask him? It's like, is that society's fault? Like, nobody asked them to deal drugs? I can understand when you say that in the schools, when you say that the schools don't have books, that's inexplicable, and that's society is at guilt for that, right? But like what people try to understand is that, you know, a lot of this seems to be problems that are self-created, and so why do the blacks sort of blame American society if they're dealing drugs? Like, why are you looking at the white guy next door? He didn't ask you to deal drugs. Like, could you explain the logic to that?
Yeah, I think the thing is that it's more than just the drugs. I think that people look for, you have to understand, when you think about after the emancipation of slavery, right? People were let loose and had absolutely no idea what to do. They've been slaves their whole entire life, right? So the best that they could do, and we know what happened after that. We know about segregation. We know about the Jim Crow laws. We know that everything that we grew up and seeing in America is very famous for during the Civil Rights Movement. So when you are, and now, first off, I don't want to sound like I'm condoning selling drugs, because I don't think that that's the way either. I think everybody would agree, any sensible person be like, well, that's not obviously the solution.
Can I interrupt? But this, we're not interested in, honestly, and we're not looking for you to tell us, like, I'm condoning. We want you to try to put us into the shoes of the mindset that has caused this sense of siege by the community. We don't think that because of that you're condoning it. We don't, because, but you know what I mean? But if you could explain the sense of siege that creates this anger and creates this lack of opportunity, that would allow us to understand better how to react when we see something that seems to us like illogical. Like somebody explained to me about the looting. He said, yeah, the looting has nothing to do with the cop killing the guy. The looting has to do with I worked my whole life, and why can't I ever afford to go into one of those stores? Because I couldn't go to an Ivy League school, and I couldn't go that. So my taking that Gucci handbag is an outburst of anger of everything that I've been denied, even though I worked so hard. I want you to try to describe to us the rage and the lack of opportunity that brings about this mindset.
But I think that's it. You know, it's very much so the like I said, it goes back to what I said at the beginning, was that the systemic racism that the communities, black communities, were redlined, right? So it was on purpose that African American communities were put in places and were given less resources. But in the place of those things, you were given drug stores, or alcohol stores. There were gun stores near those communities, right? But there weren't libraries. There weren't, you know what I'm saying? There were certain things that were missing from our communities to be able to help us grow and to educate. So what you do is, after years and years of not having equal opportunity, that's what it all comes down to, is that there was not equal opportunity. It would appear like that now. You're just like, okay, well, listen, this kid can go to college and this kid can go to college, right? But this college that these kids are both trying to go to has a long track record of years and years and years of not even accepting black students. It's already inside the system for them. It's like, now we have to create different type of special scholarships to be able to to allow black students to come into our colleges, and affirmative action that they tried back then. I don't know if that's still in effect, but certain things that would seem that you would need equality. There's no equality there. So I think that that's the issue. Everything is coming from that I don't have the same opportunities as you. And the feeling of any time that I am given the same opportunity as you, somehow it gets taken away from me. You understand what I mean? So I think that that's where a lot of the rage and different things are coming from, for sure. Like you said, if I've never been able to afford all these things, design and things like that, but the truth is they mean nothing, right? They mean nothing to anybody. They don't mean anything to them. But it's just the fact that, I've always wanted. And you know what I'm saying, I'm going to take the opportunity. Now, the truth is, looking at from everything that I've seen, it looks like whatever other group that came in breaking the windows or whatever that were not African American initially. So as soon as everything was broken, the opportunity was like, everything's open. I'm running. I'm taking everything that I can. Not to mention the economy has been completely crashed. People have been sitting at home. There's no way for them to make money. You understand what I'm saying? So, I mean, you almost like it'd be silly to say, well, like, hey, why are they taking stuff? You know what I mean? So
if I could just then back up, you're saying you were never given a chance to education because there were no textbooks, right? And if the opportunity to move ahead in life is taken away from somebody, that leads to everybody else is getting ahead and you're stuck behind, that leads to anger. And it doesn't, after many years of anger, whatever the match is that sets it off, it's just a match to unleash something that's been bubbling very deeply underneath, right? Does that feel fair to say?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's being perpetuated and it's being pushed a lot more by the media also. But I think people are genuinely feeling the rage, and this has been bubbling for 400 years. For 400 years, this has been bubbling. To know you've been, you know what I'm saying, at best a second-class citizen for 400 years. It's it's only after a while, this is not to compare at all to what's going on in Israel between Yidden and the Palestinians. This is 400 years of being oppressed. You understand what I mean? And if I can't beat you this way, then I'll beat you another way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so people, it was a snowball effect, and unfortunately, this is the way that people are expressing their anger.
Have you personally in life ever come across racism in your personal life?
Absolutely, I've come across racism. What is funny is that I've come across racism more. As I would say, I've encountered probably even more anti-Semitism than I have racism in my life. And I think primarily because of, geographically being, like I said, in the Northwest, was very liberal, very North, it's very passive-aggressive. Like I said, the system may be racist, but people will smile and be happy in your face. Like we'll talk about gentrification of the neighborhoods, right? All the property tax, everything is raised up. They buy up everything, right? Now, it's very interesting how you have the same exact problems in New York. Look at a lot of communities where you didn't have moved in, were able to get into cheaper communities and different things like that. So then who they have a problem with? They have a problem with Yidden. But I would say that by and large, most Orthodox Jews are conservative, right? And it's already in their head that most African Americans, I would say, obviously are Democrats, right? So they already, the view is that, you're different from me and you're doing this because you think you're in power and whatever else comes along with that. But how is it in Seattle the same exact thing happens, right? Your neighborhoods are gentrified and all that. Who is it? This is the left. They moved in, and because they took your neighborhoods and everybody's screaming about it, but you don't make too much of a fuss about it. Why? Because they put in the front of the lawn Black Lives Matter on all of the, so now it's okay. So I feel like also too is some type of I feel like the community all together is being used. You understand what I mean? I feel like it's being used. I feel like they're being played for. I feel like a lot of this is behind wanting votes. You understand? So I feel very, very bad, but I don't feel like this, whatever's going on right now, is going to bring a positive solution.
Could you give us an example of some time when you encountered racism?
I remember being on a bus one time, and we were there with a few friends, and a lot of us, it was very, very rowdy. And I remember there was a gentleman on the bus, and he didn't, at first, nobody really paid attention to the gentleman as much as his discomfort. right? And so he starts jeering and making faces at us, obviously older white male or whatever. And so he starts to move away. So the guys over there, they're just like, they're going to start obviously turning up the notch, and he keeps looking back, and he starts jeering even more and more and more. And so when the kids ask him, "Why are you doing that? Are you racist?" And he goes, "Yes, I am racist." And so that was one experience that I could say that I experienced outside of it. That's the most that's the best I can give you for your podcast. Other stuff I would not like to say.
Okay. Well, Nissim, we all wish you. When is your next album coming out?
I don't know. Every day I'm working. To be honest, song by song. We're taking it song by song.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
Okay, all the best.
Joining us is Rabbi Chaim Tzvi Senter. He's Rosh Yeshiva of Aderes HaTorah in Yerushalayim, otherwise eponymously known as Senter's Yeshiva. He's a Talmud of Ramey Stern, of Rabbi David Kohen of Hebron. He was a Talmud of somebody who I was very close to, I loved so much, Rabbi Baruch Finkel. Rabbi Senter was a Maggid Shir in the Mir for 10 years. Welcome, Rabbi Chaim Tzvi.
Shalom Aleichem, thank you for having me.
Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, your yeshiva is in Mei Sharim, in that right near the Mir, which is really the world epicenter of Hafganos.
Yes,
right. I remember when I learned in the Mir, I remember what used to go on. In fact, I had to once testify where they arrested a bunch of boys from the Mir, what were they doing there, etc. But so, give me what is your opinion about Hafganos? Like, do they serve a purpose? Should Yeshiva Bachram be going? Right? Are there problems, maybe if it's on Shabbos, where we're Goyim, it's a gram of Chil Shabbos? Are they Bittul Torah? You're Rosh Yeshiva. I'm sure you get this question all the time from the boys. What do you tell them?
Okay, so there's a lot of things here that you mentioned. I'm going to try to answer all of them. We're actually in Beis Yisrael. We're right by Kikar Zvil. The yeshiva is presently in the Zvil building. And you can see the Hafganos happening. We've had situations where the police, I've been called and told that we are going to storm your building because there's people on the roof. It wasn't my Talmidim. There are people that got up from the other side and they were throwing things from the roof, and everything happens right outside the building. We have to lock the building sometimes because sometimes the protester will run into the building and then the police come after them. And we are right there, and it's something that I've seen many times. And I also had a situation once where one of my Talmidim was arrested, actually, and I had to be there in court with him and all that. He was not doing anything. He was just, again, we're right there. So what happens when we have a Hafgana is the police just grab someone. They just, they run. This boy was walking back to yeshiva, happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They nailed him. And there was police brutality involved. But honestly, I think there's a limit to how much we could blame the police for this, because they can't know who's throwing a rock. You have 30 people there. Someone stands behind everyone and throws it. They'll never see him. So what they do is they just grab someone and they say that they saw him, and someone will testify, this person did something. But they have no other way of stopping this riot. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of the what happens, the bad side, the ugly side of a riot. There's two different things. There's a protest and a riot. If we're talking about the Hafganos that get violent or disruptive or they cause damage, I think that from my experience, they definitely are effective. They definitely get attention, and they're causing people to stand up and listen. To a certain extent, there are two different things that a person might want. You might want people to sympathize with you, and I'll tell you a story. What happened when I was in the jail? I was there to try to get this Talmud out, and the way we got him out of jail is we got him on a flight that night, and that was it. He was out of the country, and that was the end. But I had to be in jail, and I was there, and there was one of the Hasidim, and this was the riots that had to do with, there was a Hasidish woman, and it's very hard to even know really what happened, because, the courts will say one thing, and the Hasidim will say something else. They took her children away, and they're saying that she was abusive and she was not healthy, and the Hasidim were, turned the world over. So I'm standing there. We're waiting for our turn, and there's a chassid who is there. What they did with this particular Hafgana is they insisted on being arrested. The chassidim went and insisted on being arrested, and this chassid asked to be arrested. They wouldn't arrest him, so he started. I don't know exactly what he did to the policeman. If he hit him or raised. He started getting out of hand so that the police arrested him, and he was arrested and put in jail. So now they're going to let him out of jail. Now, let me tell you what happened, by the way, just I'm going off a little bit. They arrested so many people that they couldn't do anything, because how many people can they have in jail already? They were there at the jail, and there was 200 people outside of the jail, 200 people inside of the jail, and they're singing a kumzitz. They're having the chorus and the rest of the song, and they're singing back. It was craziness, and the whole. After a while, they just let everyone out. They just get out, and they sent everyone out of jail, aside for the people that they already booked. So my Talmud was arrested earlier in this riot, and therefore he was already booked. He was stuck in jail. He had to go in front of the judge. So did this other person. So he's there, and the judge asked this chassid. It was a lady. She asked the chassid, and he wouldn't look at her, obviously. She asked him, "Why did you do this?" And he said, "Because my Rebbe told me to." And she said, "I want to tell your Rebbe I want to speak to him." Now, I'm sure that didn't happen, but there's no way for her to understand. What does that mean? I don't get it. And I don't think that anyone in that courtroom was feeling sympathetic. Like, it just sounded foolish. So I don't think that they're getting sympathy from the other side, or I don't think they're getting understanding. But they are getting a reaction. So it is somewhat useful, and it definitely is effective. I can't say it's beneficial. That's a whole different story.
Do you let your boys go? Do you let Bachram go?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I explained to them also, the reason why Bachram often go to Afghan is it's action. There's a lot of action there. There's a lot of things going on, and the Bachram don't really want to go to protest. They want to go just to, we try to wrap our head around the fact that you're talking about Yidden fighting with Yidden. It's a tragedy. How can you go there? But Rabbi
Senter, let's step back for a minute.
Sure.
Well, Yashiv was famously asked by Rav Malka, a Rav, I think in Tveria, some part, who wrote a tshuva, and he said that you should not go to protests because there's no din of Eicheach Techiach, and he brings the Biur Halacha and Hilchos Kippur that says that there's no din of Eicheach Techiach where it's a pyric oil, and where the guy's a kaifer, and they're not going to listen, and they know, etc. So there's no din, he's not achicha anymore. And Rabbi Yashivli famously answered, as you intimated at the beginning, that we're not going al techiach techiach, has nothing to do with that. We're going there to stand up for the kavod of Shabbos. Right?
For sure.
Right? So my question is, given that, why wouldn't you allow your boys to go?
So, let me tell you a short story, if I could. When I was a kid, this is like literally, it's like ingrained in my memory. I was a little boy. We were visiting Eretz Yisrael, and we were walking across towards the Ramada Hotel, and it was pouring rain. And there was one Alti Yerushalmi who was standing there, drenched, and he was making a Hafgana by himself, Shabbos. He was screaming Shabbos, the cars that were driving by. And I remember that's a person that's going because it really bothers him. And he's going, there's no fame. It's very uncomfortable. It was pouring rain. He was just going because he felt in his heart that that's something he has to do. If a person is going to a Hafgana because he wants action, sometimes we have to make Hafgana, and I want to try to address that. But even when we have to, it's a terrible thing. It's a horrible thing that we're in this position where we have to, and leave alone the Hafgana, the fighting that's happening. That's why people are going. They want to see its action. There's water tanks. There's police on horses. All this is a tragedy. It's a tragedy that this is happening. So if a person goes, I'm curious.
Why do you consider it a tragedy? I mean, isn't so much of life about different opinions and making sure that both sides are heard And the demonstration is a way of saying that our position is being heard now. There have always been Freya. We have Dasan and Aviram in this week's Parsha. We've always had plenty of Dasan and Avirams in society. There have always been Maiminim and not Maiminim. There's the Vahayim Shamaya, Vahayim Lois Ishmu, right? So I don't see it as a tragedy. I see it as part of the journey of Klal Yisrael through history.
Right. So Klal Yisrael has had quite a bit of tragedy in their history, and we're Baruch Hashem, our ship is still sailing, but we've been injured. But let me just clarify. I don't mean just a protest. I have been to 2 protests in my life, and that's what I really wanted to mention. You talk about there are times when we should protest. I've been to 2 protests in my life. They were both peaceful protests. We said Tehillim. We heard Divrei Hasayrus. There was nothing that happened, nothing that was any type of damage. There was no fighting. There was no friction. So, of course, I understand if a person is going to a protest and it's going to be a peaceful protest, then those also are effective, I believe, and I think more effective in a certain way because you're outclassing the other whoever is your opponent. And when we start burning garbage cans and we start fighting with the police, and we're fighting with Yidden. It's Yidden fighting Yidden. That is terribly painful. I'm not talking about a protest. We could have a protest. I'm talking about what borders on a riot. And that's what happens there. They tear down streetlights, they burn garbage cans, and they throw rocks at police.
And they call them Nazis.
And they call them Nazi. I try to explain to Bachram now. Bachram don't call them Nazi. They don't get that close into this whole thing. But they just want to be spectators. But if you understand what the word Nazi means, to call a Yid a Nazi, it is such it's a bizoyon. And these poor policemen, they're just trying to do their jobs. These are not, they're told by their commander or whoever's in charge of them, their supervisor, to go do that. They're not, I get in the middle. I mamish get in the middle. I'm there because there's a Hafgana going on in front of our yeshiva. So I go to the police. I tell them, listen, this is my school over here. Okay. And I'm going to keep them, safe. I'm going to keep them, passive, but please do not start up with anyone over there. And I talk to them, and they're not, most of them, I'm not saying everyone, but the ones that I have spoken to, they're not even angry. They just say, could you explain this to me? And they're just trying to help, and they're just trying to, this is just a policeman who's doing his job.
And more likely than not, Rabbi said to that, the majority of these policemen, maybe all of them, have served in the Israeli army and put their lives at risk to defend the Jews.
That's correct.
To defend the lives of the people who are protesting, who didn't go to the army.
Exactly. I remember one time I was at the Koisel, and there was a Chefetz Chashud at the Koisel. And there was someone who was davening, and the police came over and said, could you please move? And he ignored them. And he's just trying to save your life. He's not trying to do anything to you. It wasn't during Shmoneh Esrei. He was saying to him, it's like, there's such a disregard for anything. And Eretz Yisrael is very different than America that way. And it was very painful to me. He's not trying to disrupt your davening. There's a Chefetz Chashud. There's something that's dangerous here. So, and we cause so much animosity. It, to me, is a tragedy. Rabbi Aryeh Levin, who left such a strong legacy, was able to change so many people with love and understanding and appreciation.
So in short, you're against Hafganas. Are you against peaceful Hafganas too?
No. I don't think that yeshiva bachrim belong there unless we're talking about something that's risking the very fabric of our lifestyle and our community. But in general, yeshiva bachrim belong in the Beis Medrash.
So have you ever been to a Hafgana?
I've been to 2 Hafganas in my life.
And what were
these?
These
were Hafganas that were tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of people. The first one was in the time of the Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and he was championing he was calling a secular revolution in Eretz Yisrael. At the time, they were bringing conservative and reform into the rabbinate, and it was risking very much the fabric of Yiddishkeit. And there was tens of thousands, I would say even hundreds of thousands, at the Knesset Le'ir, at the entrance to Yerushalayim. We were there. We davened mincha there. I remember very clearly the mincha, and we said Tehillim there. Very peaceful. And then recently, again, it was the same type of thing. It was talking about the whole matzav of the giyus of the trying to enlist yeshiva bachrim into the army. And those are the two Hafganos that I've been to. I mean, as far as being part of the protest, those are the two that I've been to.
So let me ask you, you're here in the United States now on a visit, and you're aware of what's going on with the rioting and because of the killing of a gentleman by the name of Floyd, George Floyd or something like that. What's your opinion of that?
Of the riots that are happening?
Yeah.
So I want to point out one major difference between even the destructive riots that are happening in Eretz Yisrael, even the ones that they're burning down garbages and destroying property and all those things, and what's happening here, from what I understand. I've never heard of one riot in Eretz Yisrael from people that they ever took anything for themselves. I've never heard of one riot in Eretz Yisrael where they did damage to any person other than disrupting traffic and that, which is its own discussion, but where they actually hurt somebody or they would steal from somebody or anything like that.
They'd have burned police cars and stuff. I've seen that.
That's public. That's public property. They've destroyed They've destroyed trash cans. They've destroyed, like I said, traffic lights. And other things. They've done damage to public property, but they've never taken anything for themselves. And when you take something for yourself, it changes the entire understanding of what you're doing. Is this an agenda that you just want to take things, or are you trying to protest? Because the protest doesn't change whether if you take a pocketbook and you burn it, or you take a pocketbook and you keep it. That doesn't change how much attention you're going to get. That just changes whether or not, I'm looking to take something. So lots of people, and I think that we can all agree about this, we're just in this for the ride. I get free stuff. So I'm going to go out. I'm going to, break down the doors and break windows, go in and take things. This is not something that is even coming from a place of anything that is about this gentleman who his family is saying don't do this. But
Rabbi Senter, so absent looting, but destructive behavior such as burning police cars, breaking windows, etc. Is that something that you would? What's your opinion about that?
So I think that it definitely gets attention.
Not taking. Yeah.
I understand. I think it definitely gets attention. I think it definitely has an effect. If you'd ask me what is going to bring about change, I think that Martin Luther King brought about change because he outclassed his opponent. He didn't fight with them. He was bigger than them. He was more in control than them. And I think that in the end of the day is what's going to help you. I don't think that the American people respect the American white people, I should say, respect the rioters or whoever's not rioting, respect the rioters now because of what they've done. They're not gaining respect. So you'll get their attention. That's true. But if you really want change to happen, and I believe even there's a statistic that came out today that after rioting, there was actually more police brutality. And I understand it because the police are saying you're acting like animals. Now they're getting attention, and I believe that it will affect that now it's going to have to be addressed, but it's not going to get a real change. We want a real change. So then you have to learn that you have to get the respect of whoever it is that you're trying to get their attention. So do I think it's going to cause a long-term a change? And I think if anything, we're just going in the wrong direction. Therefore, I wouldn't suggest it. Do I think that I understand where they're coming from? I understand their frustration. I do.
Rabbi Senter, let me ask you, in the story in Shoftim, Pilegesh Begiva, where the Pilegesh of somebody from Shevet Binyamin was raped, and the people were quiet, and he tried to get attention, and nobody would stand up. So he dismembered her into 12 parts.
Yeah.
And he sent her body, the pieces of the organs of her body, to 12 Chlakim of Klal Yisrael. And guess what? Boy, did it create a reaction. And they all came together, Klal Yisrael, to Binyamin, and they severely punished Binyamin, etc. So you do have, halachically, you certainly have from Chazal, from the Torah, Tanakh, the concept of when there are wrongs that are being done societally, institutionally, societally in mass, sometimes we have to break some glass to get people to focus. Now, I'm not taking any positions or sides, but is it possible that the protesters say, violence, police violence towards blacks has been ongoing for decades. It's ignored, and it happens again and again and again, and you know what? It's time for a Pilegesh Begiva. It's time to stop just showing up and smiling and chanting. We have to do something that actually brings outrage and brings people up, makes them sit up in their seats. How would you respond to such an argument?
Well, first of all, I know the story of Pilegesh Begiva, obviously. I don't know all of the Meforshim on it, but my understanding is that what he did was definitely startling, without a question, to cut up and send her dismembered body to the different shvatim, and it definitely creates like a shock. But again, he didn't do anything that was damaging to anyone. He didn't do anything. He didn't cause property damage.
Well, I'll bring you something. So I'll find you something with property damage. In Shechem, the Rambam writes, the reason why the Shvatim were allowed to kill them, the Rambam writes, and the Ramban and the Maral all go with Signoi Nechad, they said it's the anti-Kitty Genovese story. If you stand by silently, right, as a society, when an ill is done, you are now considered part and parcel of this nefarious behavior, and therefore it goes so far as you deserve to die. So I would say if they deserve to die, they could certainly break some glass. But that's certainly a situation where for the same, your point is you never see that it could be done unto others, and I'm giving you a case besides Pilegesh Begiva where it's done unto others. I'll probably think of another one, a case or two, if you give me a minute to, but start with that.
Right. So first of all, you're exceptional at bringing these makaris. I'm always amazed by the way you do that. That's a great source. I wanted to bring another story.
Rabbi Senter, let me say it differently, because most of my listeners, I get these calls all the time that I'm a Meshuggah, a liberal, etc. But I try, in every din Torah, you're supposed to try to see the other side. And I would ask my listeners, what would be if this guy, this Reitzeach in Minneapolis, I forgot his name, Chauvin, let's say it had been a yeshiva boy's neck it was on, and there had been 3 or 4 other similar situations where yeshiva bachram, when all of a sudden died in custody, like just happened in St. Louis, etc., in the last year or 2 or 3, and it was known that they hate, like we had in Germany, not that. And people said, you know what? It's time to break some glass. Would we see it the same way?
That's a great question. But I'm just trying to figure out. We've been at this for so many years. And I don't think that the only time that I've seen any real change is when someone stood up with nobility, with class, with vision. He had a direction. I don't think these Hafganos have a direction. I don't think that they're really trying to get anything. Like, they don't have a goal. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? There's no leadership here. These are all important things, and like the civil rights movement had all of those things. There was a target. There was something they wanted. There was leadership. There was unity. This is just pandemonium.
Well, I would say, Rabbi Sender, I would say that there is a dearth of black leaders, without a doubt, and nobody's stepping up. So it's really a grassroots. And I would also venture to say that they would tell you that 98% of them are peaceful, and it's the 2% that are destructive that get a lot of press. And it's possible. I mean, I haven't done a census or anything, but it's certainly possible.
Right.
I mean, they certainly breaking,
possible.
You had a beautiful story that Rebbe Baruch Finkel told you.
Yeah.
About a purpose, yes, to be mafkin. Could you share that with us?
I was actually being Menachem Movel by Rebbe Baruch by his mother. It was in his mother's apartment. They used to live in the building of the new yeshiva.
Yeah, right next to my apartment, right next to my room.
Yeah. So he was sitting there, and he told us the following story. He was telling a story about his mother's father, if I'm not mistaken. His name was Reb David Levin, and he was Machaber the Sefer Darkei David. And this was early on in the establishment of the state. And we know that, early on there was always a struggle with Kedusha Shabbos. That's where Kikar Shabbos got its name, because of the Hafganos that happened there. Anyway, but he was walking the street. I guess he was sometime early in his stay there. He had come, and it was a Friday night, and he had seen someone driving by him who was clearly Jewish on Friday night, Rabbi Yitzchok's grandfather, and he was so shocked that someone could possibly be Machal Shabbos in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, that he fainted on the spot. They had to take him to the hospital. And he got out of the hospital, and sometime later, whenever it was, he was walking on a Friday night again, and again he saw someone driving on Shabbos, and he got the tziter, which means like his body started shaking, but he didn't faint. And he told his family, if seeing Chil Shabbos is going to have this type of impact on me, that I've become desensitized to it, so I never want to walk out on Shabbos again in the street. And he said his grandfather did not walk the streets of Yerushalayim. He wasn't mafgin or anything like that, but he didn't walk the streets of Yerushalayim just because he didn't want to see it. And seeing it has a very negative impact on a person. And I think that some of the reason why people are doing these Hafganos in Eretz Yisrael is because for themselves. Again, this is part of what we got back to, is that they're doing it because they feel that it's going to affect their own sensitivity towards Shabbos. And if they go out there and they protest, it'll strengthen, it'll bolden them themselves. And that way they won't be desensitized to it.
I once heard over a vart. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu, right, by the Sneh, it says that he was not mabit to the Sneh. He didn't look at the Sneh. So Chazal's darshan, because he was not mabit, he was zeichet to Pnei Hashem mabit by the Mara in the Sur. So I saw over from Nachum Rabinovich, I think I heard it from him, he said a beautiful thing. He says, Moshe was not mabited by the Sneh, right? Why not? He said, because Moshe is supposed to be the Saneger for Klal Yisrael. He's like the father. He only sees the good of Klal Yisrael. And it says, when the Rebbeinu Shalom in the Sneh wanted him to look, what did he want? What does that mean? He wanted to explain to him why he's doing, what's all the tzar is coming for, which chatoim it's because of, etc., etc. And Moshe was sar lahabit. He didn't want to see. What's the word? I don't want to hear anything bad about Klal Yisrael. I want to be able to speak about Klal Yisrael in the most beautiful, amazing way. I want to represent them, like a lawyer who doesn't believe in their client's innocence anymore. Their closing speech has a different, it thunders different. But there's something about being impacted by seeing something wrong, by hearing something wrong. Right. He's saying he never refused to walk on Shabbos. He did not want to ever see a Chil Shabbos.
Yeah, I want to be most of to that if I could. And I heard from a barrel wine. I don't remember who he's saying the shame. He had said that if you contrast Yaakov's parting words to Klal Yisrael and Moshe's, Yaakov was seeing the flaws, and a lot of what he said was criticism, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu. As a manhig, he was looking at their good, and that was Moshe Rabbeinu's. That was like his matara, was I'm going to see the good, I'm going to emphasize the good.
I want to share with you one of my favorite Rebbe Baruch stories. I think I've said it before. He was in Eretz Yisrael considered one of the best Bachrim, in the whole Eretz Yisrael. Besides Yichis and Lomdish and Havana, Rav Shach read him a shidduch, and he went out and he didn't like the girl. Rav Shach said to him, if I was nicht, he said, "Valsen ich doch kin Meshicha." Now, this is negative, by the way, what they tell every seminary girl. So if seminary girls are listening, please shut off the thing now. So Rav Shach said to him what they teach in every seminary. It says, Vayava Yitzchak es Rivka hella, Vayaveh. First you get married, and then comes the Hava. So Rabbi Baruch, he was a bachav. As he looks at Rav Shach, and his eyes twinkle, and he says, Rav Shach, says, Rav Shiva says, Ze zogt as ich will chasen haben wie Yitzchakin, efshe will ich chasen haben wie Yankifin. What did it say by Yaakov? Yishak Yaakov Rachel Isis Kaila Vayek. He says, he said Rav Shach laughed, and that was the end of the shidduch.
That's a great story. Rabbi Baruch, we used to always do his Chayesora Shir. It was one of his highlights of his year to speak about shidduchim. But listen to this great story. My great-grandfather, his name was Moshe Aaron Peleyev. He was Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshiva Yitzchok Grossman. And he grew up in the house of Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. He went to Yeshiva in Slutsk, and he was a Talmud there. So when he put his children to sleep, his grandchildren, he used to tell them over stories. And we have these stories in our family as a tradition. Everything has been recorded and written down. And he told the following story. When he was in Slutsk, so the mashgiach there was ruffling the older Bachrim. And the Bachrim felt like they weren't happy with the way he was treating them. And they decided they're going to make Hafganah. So the Bachrim decided one day they're just not showing up in the Beis Medrash. My Alter Zayda was either younger or he was just too tamim to be a part of this whole thing. He walked into the Beis Medrash and he asked the Bachrim, like, what's going on? Where is everybody? And one of the Bachrim just shrugged and he saw something's going down, something's happening. The mashgiach comes to sit in the seat. All of a sudden, the Bachrim storm the Beis Medrash. They pick him up on his chair, and they physically take him out and put him down and say, "You are out of here." This is what happened in Slutsk. So Rabbi Zalman called the Bachrim in and said to them, "What's going on over here?" So they said to him, "We feel like that he's not treating us properly, and we don't want to be here with him. We don't want to be here. So it's either him or it's us." I'm not sure about that Nakud if they said it mamish that sharp, but I think that's what they said. So Rabbi Zalman, first thing he said to them, I hear you, and perhaps it's a problem, but this is not the way to deal with it. So Rabbi Zalman was, who was himself a man of peace and of love, he was telling them, this is not the way to deal with it. And he actually had the mashgiach stay out of yeshiva for a little while till things calmed down, and slowly brought the mashgiach back in. Now, what's interesting also is that the Rebbetzin felt the Bachrim were right, and eventually the mashgiach was asked to leave the yeshiva. But still, the Rabbi Zalman said, this is not the way to deal with it. This is not appropriate for B'nai Torah. And if we're trying to figure out what is, how to superimpose what's happening, on the street here in America and what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, I think we have to realize that B'nai Torah have to be held to a higher standard. We have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and there's a certain way a person has to protest. That's the story.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Senter, and stay safe in your travels.
Thank you so much.
Kol tov, Thank you. Bye bye. Joining us from South Africa is the Chief Rabbi of South Africa, Rabbi Warren Goldstein. It's an honor to have you with us. Welcome, Rabbi Goldstein.
Thank you, David. It's wonderful to be with you and with all of your listeners.
So, Rabbi Goldstein, you live in South Africa where apartheid was such a problem, and I imagine continues on some level to be a problem. That's, I'm projecting. Could you give us a little bit of an understanding as a South African as to, here in America, there's this tremendous sense of aggrievement that the African Americans, the blacks, feel that they aren't being treated well, and therefore they're rioting, right? Tzuvevkinu balayla. And it's very hard for us as Jews for many of the Orthodox who maybe we don't come in contact with them. Maybe it's because we come from most of our grandparents, probably 95%, are immigrants who came to Ellis Island with zero. And we don't really understand this aggrievement. I mean, or the sense of victim. I mean, we came post-Holocaust. Could you try to explain it so we can sort of be empathetic, to help our empathy?
Yes. Well, firstly, from a South African perspective, the apartheid system was in place until 1994. In 1994, in South Africa, it moved into a system of free democracy for all. The first president of the democratic South Africa was President Nelson Mandela, and that ushered in a new era of non-racialism. And I think that what is so important to realize is that apartheid is and the word apartheid, by the way, is it's an Afrikaans word, and it means separateness. It was the term that was used to describe the policies of the racist government of the National Party, in which they imposed discrimination against Black South Africans. And you can remove apartheid from the statute books, but you can't remove it from people's hearts. And that sense of discrimination and prejudice can live on in people's hearts. President Nelson Mandela was a person who preached non-racialism and the importance of the dignity and equality of all human beings. And he spoke out against all forms of prejudice. So I think what is important to the important perspective to understand this from a Torah perspective is a number of key Torah principles. Number one is the principle of oinas devarim, where we understand, and Chazal understood very deeply, how a human being can be hurt by another person through words which are said, which are insulting, which are disparaging, and of course there's actual actions which can cause even more harm. But we understand the power of words and the power of prejudice to hurt feelings, and I think it's so important that as Jews we are at the forefront of understanding and empathizing and rejecting any form of racism, because Chazal gave us direction based on the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the direction to reject racism. The concept in the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, Chaviva Adam Sheniva B'Tselem, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, where one of the reasons Chazal give for the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world with Adam and Chava and not en masse was in order to eradicate racism, so that Shelo Yoma, that a person shouldn't say that my father was greater than yours, that there is an intrinsic superiority of one race over another. So Chazal said these fundamental principles, rejecting racism, long before it was politically correct to do so, and therefore I think as Jews and as B'nai Torah, it is so important that we speak with the Ruach of Chazal, which is rooted in this concept of Chaviva Adam Sheniva B'Tselem.
Rabbi Goldstein, you've been to America. Do you find that in America we're lacking in the Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem as Americans towards African Americans?
I can't comment on a society, that I don't live in, because, when I visited America, I've come in for a few days here or there, maybe a day or two in New York and a day or so in one or two other places. It's very hard to assess a country. What I do know is, and it's got nothing to do with America per se, it is part of human nature that we look at each other. One human being will look at another human being and see things which look different, which are different, whether it's skin color or it's social status or it's whatever it may be. And as human beings, we are influenced by what we see and externalities, and it's so easy to get pulled into prejudice. And I'm saying even in the context of South Africa, where we've had this history of legislated racism, which was apartheid, which was, it was mamish an abomination. It was a terrible, evil system that was a tyranny and that was very hateful and very hurtful to so many South Africans. Even with that history, South Africa, even to this day, struggles with these issues because it's part of human nature, and we need to overcome that. We need to be misgaber on that, and it's so important because it goes to the heart of Torah values. If you think about the lashon of Chazal in the Mishnah, for Chazal they said they used the lashon chaviv, beloved. It's precious, beloved, every human being. Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tzelem, and therefore it's part of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That and we learn that, let's say, from Avraham Avinu, that Gemara, which there's a beautiful Maharal on, the Gemara where Avraham Avinu, when the Malachim come, and he doesn't know they're Malachim when he sees them. At first, he thinks they are wayfarers, Avodah Zarah, and yet he goes and he's in a situation of being Mekabel Pnei HaShechina, and he leaves that to go and deal with them. And there the Gemara says, God will Hafganos Effective, and the Maharal says, he says, because he was going out to be Makabel with Tzelem Elokim, which was going to be a more immediate form of Kabbalah Pnei HaShechina. It's a very powerful Maharal on their Parshas Vayera. So as B'nai Torah, we need to live with that heightened awareness of what Yaviv Adam Sheniva B'Tzelem, because then we are giving cover to HaKadosh Baruch Hu every time we give cover to another human being.
So Rabbi Goldstein, I've been asked this by a number of people, right? And they asked me, what's the Torah's attitude towards racism? And one of the questions they'll ask me is, it says, V'tadaber Miriam v'Aaron, it's this week's parsha, right? Al oidei sa'isha kushis asher lakach ki isha kushis lakach. And Rashi, the Rishonim don't speak about it in what we would call a necessarily positive way, the way they explain Isha Kushis, or B'nei Kushim Atem Li, or Chazal about Chum. How would you explain that to a Giyaris, for example?
Look, to explain, the Lafia Emes, I think any reading of the Rishonim or any of our holy Svarim, to read it in any way which is racist is Pashut Sheker. In my opinion, it's Pashut Sheker. If that's the pshat the person comes out with, then it's go back and relearn the pshat. It's an affront to the fact that Chazal established these principles long before anybody else. And to me, it's a terrible chilul Hashem. If anyone who regards himself as a Ben Torah, firstly would be a racist to start with. It's beyond the pale. It is a rejection of the Chaviv Adam Sheniva B'Tzelem, which Chazal were explicit with, and it is and then to take their own personal prejudice and impose it on the Torah. That's even a bigger chilul Hashem that there could possibly be. Because it's one thing if a person has this chesronis and they fall and they don't have the good midas and they fall into this way of not being able to recognize the Chaviv Adam Sheniva B'Tzelem, if they can't reach that madrega themselves, and then they want to bring down the whole Torah with it, it's a nonsense.
I understand that, but how do you understand the Rishonim who speak about Isha Kushis in a pejorative manner? So I'm not, and this is questions that I've been asked, and they'll pull out a Rashi or Rashbam, etc. And
each one of these things we've got to have a look at, and there are explanations for each thing. It's not I'm just saying to you, it's just not right pshat. It's like saying you're going to come out with a pshat on something, and it comes out in a certain way. I'm happy to look at each thing. You can have a look at the lashon of Rashi and understand what he's saying. But it's.
I'll read the lashon of Rashi. Rashi says, "Isha Kushis ka'adam hakoyre as benoi noah." He calls his handsome son Kushi kedei shaloi tishlit by ayin hara. It's like lashon sagi noah. I mean, it doesn't sound. It sounds. Doesn't sound positive.
What is Rashi? No, I disagree. I mean, what is Rashi saying in the first place? What is even the Pashut Pshat in the Rashi to understand it? It's and Adarabah, I'm saying, this is the wife of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's like, do we want to? We're going to fall into the same trap of the Lashon Hara.
Rabbi Goldstein, I think you also touched on another very important point, that of all people in the world, the Jews should be sensitive to it. And I want to tell too that it says, "V'haftem es hager ki gerim hayisem beretz Mitzrayim." So the Chafetz Chaim in the Sefer Mitzvahs HaKatan says, it's not just like about gerim, but it's a lesson. Torah is telling you something that you have suffered and struggled with. We have to be particularly sensitive to. Yes. Because if we're not sensitive to it, so then if we say discrimination is right, so then basically we're telling the Rebbeinu Shalom that when people discriminated against us, that was right. If we can discriminate, so there's nothing wrong about those who discriminated against us. In fact, the Chafetz Chaim in the Sefer Mitzvah says it's just a mushal. He says if somebody moves into your neighborhood and he's a stranger, they just move it from Borough Park to Lakewood, or from Lakewood to Los Angeles, and you don't invite them for Shabbos, and you don't help them and make them feel comfortable, you're over on the Kigerim Hayisem Beretz Mitzrayim. You have to be particularly sensitive to something that you lived through it. It's just a metaphor the Chafetz Chaim lives. So you're saying there's no nation in the world that has suffered from racism, from discrimination, anti-Semitism, from prejudice. In the whole world, we take number one. We win the trifecta on this area. So how could we not be sensitive to it? Midaraisa. That's what your point is.
That's exactly, and I'll just be moist with one Nakuda on that. There's a beautiful verse on that from the Mitzvah where he says on that pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, because it says in Parshas Mishpatim when it says Kiger and Yitzim, it says Kiatem Gedatem et Nefesh Hager. He says that we know the potential that lies within the human being, because in Mitzrayim, the Mitzrayim said about us, nothing would become of us, that we were a threat to society, that we were this, that we were that, and then look at the godless that we achieved when we left Mitzrayim. So he says, when you look at someone who's a stranger, who's coming from the outside, and you think they have no potential within them, you know the potential of the Terem Elokim, because Kiatem Yadatim et Nefesh Hager, because look what happened to Klal Yisrael. And so the story of our history is not only the story of prejudice, but it's the story of the greatness of the Terem Elokim, of what we're able to achieve. And I think that the depth of racism is the denial of human potential. It is the greatest rejection of the Tzelem Elokim that is possible to say this human being is less worthy than that human being. And they both created the Tzelem Elokim. It's a rejection of the Tzelem Elokim, which is not only an affront to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it is not believing in the awesome potential within that person. And so it's so choshev that nekuda ki atem yedatem et nefesh hager.
Rabbi Goldstein, it was an honor to have you on with us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you, and well done, Yishar Koyach, for raising these vital issues for Klal Yisrael.
Joining us from Be'er Sheva in Eretz Yisrael is Zahava Arky, who is an African-American Gioris living in Israel, married, 2 kids. She owns her own digital marketing business, so she's a millennial, cutting-edge millennial. I grew up in the United States, moved to Israel, converted, and when she was 24. Welcome, Zahava.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Zahava, a lot of Orthodox people have very little contact with Black Americans. They look at the rioting, the unrest, and they say, like, why? Like, they have the same opportunities we have. You know, they can go to the same schools we have. We just got off a Black president. We had a Black minister of justice. They're given the same opportunities. What is all this anger about? What's the outrage about? What's the hurt? And you're Orthodox, you're Jewish, you're Gioris, you went through a 5-year process. You're from Anashet. Could you try to give us an understanding into what it's like to walk in the shoes of an African American?
Sure, I can try. So basically, I understand where the community is coming from. On the outside, it very much looks like African Americans have the same opportunities, the same freedoms as everyone else. And, you know, in all technicalities, I guess one could say that they do. But in reality, there are a lot of things put in place and things within our culture that actually prevent African Americans from succeeding, prevent them from just living their lives and doing the everyday things that they'd like to do. There's, without going too much into the systematic aspect of racism or racism in our culture and our government, we can also talk about just specific things that happen to people, Black people, on a daily basis, and including myself. I actually moved back to America when I was almost 16 years old, and I didn't actually know that these types of racism were still in existence and still real. And as someone who's very well educated, and I come from a good family, and my father's very successful, I was treated only by the color of my skin, only what people perceived me to be by the color of my skin. So I have a few different stories, some more powerful than others. But for instance, I was 16, standing outside of the mall, and a cop came and stopped me, asked me what I was doing there. And I was just waiting for my mom to pick me up from the mall. He was interrogating me, asking me what I'm doing here. Am I coming? Am I going? When is my mother coming? And I don't see my white counterparts getting asked these questions. There's all types of different microaggressions going on within our culture, in the non-Jewish community and also in the Jewish community. I can recall a story when, before my wedding, I went into a store with my mother and mother-in-law, and I was looking to buy a sheitel. I was very excited. I'm getting married, and it's incredible. And I go into the store to buy a sheitel, and the sheitel macher was kind of following me around. And finally, she asked me, do I need help? Which is a normal question. And I said, right now I'm just looking. And then she said, well, I don't think you're going to find anything here or within your price range. Didn't know anything about me. I'm a Jewish woman. I'm about to get married. This is my very first sheitel, and she already assumes that this place is not for me. And just like a lot of people feel like, what are you doing here? What are you doing in America? What are you doing in this place?
And how did it feel when she asked you? What did you feel like when she asked you that question?
Oh, I was so embarrassed. I just walked out of the store. I was so embarrassed because there was other people in the store. And it was just embarrassing. It was degrading and dehumanizing. Just because of the way I looked, you think I can't afford something or I can't shop like anyone else. Or for instance, also when looking for shidduchim, being Black and Jewish is like a disability to some shadchanim. They're like, well, given your situation, what situation? I'm young, I'm normal, I'm religious, and they set you up with people who are not Latinos at all, based on their perception of what you could get because you're a Black Jewish person.
So do you encounter racism in the just give us Jews as a whole? Did I say you're a Giores, so you're just Jewish, or have you encountered racism besides the sheitel incident in the Orthodox community?
Yeah, for sure. I was teaching in a school, for instance. I taught preschool and first grade, and one of the kids came, this is when I first started teaching, came from the playground up to the gate and started calling me a schwarze and yelling at me, which what child in their right mind would yell something at an adult, a teacher, or another person without, children don't make this up themselves. They get it from somewhere.
And how did you feel when that happened?
Oh, it was awful. I came there to teach children. I thought it was, it was a religious school. I'm teaching Torah. I'm teaching life skills to just precious little kids. And not only is it embarrassing to me and humiliating, but I feel so horrible for these children who are getting this poison put into their mind from a very young age. And I understand the situation and where it comes from. Like you said, a lot of Orthodox Jews, they don't know any other people. And the people that they do know, let's say like in their communities around, they might have Black Americans in lower income areas that may do things or not or whatever. So the only experience that they have with them is negative. I get that. But it's not a way to raise our children. It's not a way to look at the world.
What other, you mentioned systemic racism for a Black person in America that may deny them opportunities. Could you give us an example of that?
So, yeah, there are definitely laws that were put in place and still have an effect today regarding where people can buy homes, how they can buy homes, what qualifications you can buy homes, which led to a lot of the Black neighborhoods being formed, and then they don't get the same quality education, they don't get the same funding, they don't get the same quality of teachers. Also, just in general, as far as the self-esteem of Black people or children growing up, like for instance, when I was in high school, I went to the school counselor, like everybody does, to talk about colleges and universities and where we want to apply. And without even looking at my grades or my transcripts or anything, and I was telling her which universities I wanted to apply to, she slowed me down and said, well, why don't you start with community colleges? Why don't you look at community college? Because I don't know if you're going to get into a university, so maybe you want to aim a little lower. I had great grades. Of course I could get into university, and I did. But these types of things kind of stunt the growth of African Americans. Also, when I was growing up in popular media, what I saw of successful people, beautiful people, for the most part, were not people who look like me. And so growing up, like, when you think about who's beautiful, who's successful, you're not thinking about yourself. Or in children's books, you don't see anybody who relates to you. And that is a form of oppression. That is a form of you don't belong here. Also, obviously, the police system, I mean, I'm not going to get into too much because there are many, many, many wonderful, amazing police officers who are doing amazing jobs, and they risk their lives every day to protect people. But then there are some who are also ingrained in this, have this culture of racism ingrained in them, and suspect Black people. My friends have gotten stopped walking to the grocery store in their own neighborhoods, asking them what they're doing, where they're going. Every day we have to think about how we're talking to people, how we're talking to cops, how we can mimic. You know, we have to say things like, okay, officer, my hands are here, I'm doing this now, so they feel comfortable because to them we're a threat. So we need to make them feel comfortable about the way that we're doing things. And just to have this constantly in our head and in our minds, how we present ourselves, how, you know, if we look the way that we do or have our hair the way that we have it naturally, that we might not get that job because they consider it unprofessional. Or the clothes that we wear, if it's not like mainstream what white people think is professional, it could be professional in Africa or like professional in our communities. But to them, it's not professional. It's too ethnic. It's too Black. And all of these things we have to think about every single day, where a lot of people, they don't realize, they don't think about racism because they don't think about race. They don't have to think about race every day because they have that privilege. They're able to just go throughout their life without thinking about how the way they look affects the way people respond to them.
Zahava, thank you very much for spending time with us and for, you know, being frank about what's probably a very emotional issue.
For sure. I really appreciate you, you know, doing this interview and trying to get personal stories out there so people can relate. And, you know, I'm happy to share stories just so people can have a little bit of an understanding about what people are so frustrated about and angry about. It's a hard thing.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Zahava, and continued success. Hatzlacha Rabbah.